Good morning. Here it is, the last hour of Asarco's smokestacks. They are coming down, and we have live, extensive team coverage on this special edition of the KFOX 14 Morning News. Good morning. I'm Stephanie Guadian.
Today is the day, isn't it? And I'm Shelton Dotson. First on Fox this morning, a historic day here in El Paso. We are just minutes away from the demolition of Asarco's last two smokestacks, set to happen around 6:45 this morning. And when this demo happens, it's going to be very similar to cutting down a tree, with the stacks landing between two berms that have been built up on the sides of each one of those stacks. We have live team coverage for you this morning. Our crews spread out through West El Paso. KFOX 14 news anchor Erica Castillo standing by with some of the former Asarco co-workers, or workers rather, who gathered near the old Jackson's restaurant on Mesa. Genevieve Curtis is at UTEP, where many people have gathered to watch the towers come down. But we start with KFOX 14 news anchor John Purvis, who's at the staging area near Asarco. John, good morning.
Good morning, Shelton. It's a little cool out here this morning and a little breezy, but I talked to Asarco site trustee Roberto Puga just about 10 minutes ago, and he assures me that this morning's breezes are not enough to get in the way of the demolition of both the smokestacks. That's scheduled to happen at 6:45. Now, just to give you an idea of how this is going to work this morning, at about 6:40, there's going to be a gentleman to my left who's going to pull out a red flag, giving us the note that there's 5 minutes to go. Then 3 minutes before the smokestacks come down, there will be a flare shot into the air, giving everybody a warning. Now, at 6:45, we're supposed to hear a boom, but Roberto Puga told me it won't be necessarily a loud boom or a loud explosion, and there will actually be a delay before the first tower comes down, a delay of about 10 seconds. The smaller 600-foot tower behind me, it may be hard to see right now because the sun's just coming up, will go down first. And then about 10 seconds after that, the iconic red and white Asarco tower will come down after that. But again, there will be a delay after the first initial demolition, after the 300 pounds of dynamite are set off. There will be a delay because of gravity before the towers actually begin to crumble. But that's when you'll see the real action, is when the towers come crumbling down, and it should all be over in less than a minute's time. Reporting live in West El Paso, John Purvis, the KFOX 14 Morning News.
John, thank you. 300 pounds of dynamite will bring down the stacks. One is 820 feet tall, the other 612. Now, the smaller stack will fall first, then the larger stack will fall 9 seconds later. And this is just the start of the Asarco demolition. The $52 million remediation of the site should be finished next year. The site will then go up for sale in 2016. The city's master plan calls for a mixed-use, high-density development on that property. Now, that could mean anything from apartments to entertainment developments, maybe even an amusement park.
And today's demolition is bittersweet for many of the thousands of Asarco workers who spent really countless hours hard at work inside the smelter. KFOX 14 news anchor Erica Castillo is live in West El Paso with that part of our coverage. Good morning, Erica.
Good morning. I am here with about a dozen of the former Asarco workers, and our estimation is that we are about 3.5–4 miles away from the actual site of the smokestacks. It is, as you describe, a bittersweet morning for these gentlemen, largely because all of these gentlemen worked there for about 2 decades, and all of them came away with medical conditions that they attribute directly to Asarco. There was a long effort that they made individually and as a group to try and stop the demolition from happening today for various reasons, but mostly because they think that what lies underneath those smokestacks is a danger to the environment and to the public. With me here today is Carlos Rodriguez, who's been rather at the forefront of this issue for the workers. Although there have been several of them, he's been the most outspoken over the course of several years, not just on the demolition of this project. So it is a bittersweet morning, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yeah. It's going to be touching for us.
It's very sentimental. It's very emotional. There's a lot of symbolism out here for you this morning.
Well, we lived our youth there. You know, I was 23 years old when I started working there, and a lot of guys. Yeah, there's a family atmosphere. You know, a lot of events that we did as ex-workers with families and everything.
Even after today, this fight isn't over, though, is it?
No, it's not. We continue our fight because there was an injustice to us. These people, this company incinerated toxic chemicals without permits. They didn't only poison us, they poisoned the entire city. possibly even our water. You know, they keep saying that the testing is negative, there's nothing wrong. This place has been here for over 100 years, and the pollution was terrible.
And we're going to be hearing more about that this morning. Thank you for being with us this morning. And there are several concerns. We'll be sharing more of that with you here this morning as we await for the Asarco smokestacks to come down. Live in West Central El Paso, Erica Castillo, KFOX 14 Morning News.
All right, certainly an emotional time. Thank you very much, Erica. This man is going to join us. We'll introduce him in just a second. But first, remember, folks, these Asarco towers have cast shadows on 2 countries and 3 states for a long time now. They've also survived the Mexican Revolution, depressions, but ultimately it was the environment that finally got them.
Yeah, this is Asarco historian Bernie Sargent. You're going to be watching this demolition with us. Now, the story really starts back in 1999. Can you explain?
Well, as far as the demolition goes, yeah, they had gone through a period of about 7 or 8 years of rebuilding it and trying to structure it in such a way that it would meet the standards that were in place at the time. But there was a lot of pressure continuously placed on them to make sure that there was nothing happening to the environment around them on both sides of the border. And what ended up happening was that issue of pollution, coupled with the copper prices falling in the toilet, so to speak, no pun intended, really gave them cause to say, wait a minute, this just isn't working. So they ultimately filed bankruptcy.
Well, and then, Bernie, the hope was that the copper industry would rebound and Asarco could open again, and it did. The copper industry did rebound, but Asarco, what happened?
Well, they were already in bankruptcy. Okay. So they were so far in debt, it was going to be almost impossible to come out of it. And again, the pressure from the environmentalists and so on to bring that up to a code that was very hard to meet, very hard to meet. So it ultimately meant their demise. There was no way they could recover from it.
Does your heart ache a little bit this morning to see the big stacks come down?
It does. When you look at the history of the Asarco going all the way back into the 1800s, late 1800s, when they opened it, and the people that worked there, and the folks that actually they gained education. A little sidebar story is a lady by the name of Eugenia Schuster. Her husband was the doctor there at the hospital, and she used to ride her little buggy up the hill, and she'd go up there and she'd reminisce about Europe and places, and she was a very religious woman, and so she ultimately convinced her husband that that was the ideal place to put a hospital, and that's Providence Hospital.
Wow. Yeah.
So, I mean, people like that, folks like Pancho Villa worked there under an alias. You know, he crossed the river with no problem. He could work for a while. The gentleman who ultimately put an end to John Wesley Hardin's life, John Selman, he worked there also. So when you're looking at the journals, the timesheets, you just go, look at the people that worked here and look at the impact, positive impact on those people.
So much we want to talk to you. We're glad that we have you. You're going to join us up to the 7:30 hour, so we'll bring you back and talk a little bit more.
I'll look forward to it.
Thank you, Bernie. Steph.
A lot of history there. Well, Asarco did not want a large staging area for the public, but the community is still turning out. One of the best places to see the demolition is at UTEP along Sunbowl Drive, and that is where we find KFOX 14 Morning News reporter Genevieve Curtis this morning. Genevieve.
Well, Stephanie, this is really one of the best places to see the demolition. Tons of people have come out to UTEP to line the mountaintops. It's hard to see the stacks right now just because the sun isn't up, but the minute the sun comes up, it is going to be a gorgeous view here. I don't know if you can see all the people that have lined the ridge and even climbed up to where the the softball complex is. People started arriving here as early as 6:30 p.m. last night just to get their spot. I talked to some people. They brought employees out. Companies are having tailgating parties up on different parking lots here on the mountaintop. I was able to talk to one Asarco worker who was here, and he was telling me that his father and his grandfather both worked for Asarco before him. He says it's just a time to remember what a special place it was for those workers. We've talked a lot about the demolition for the past couple months, last year. It's hard to believe it's happening today. People say they just really wanted to be a part of this moment. Pros, the cons, we've been talking about Asarco and the impact that it had, and people today just really want to be a part of this historical moment. And we'll keep you covered on everything going on here at UTEP as the morning continues. We're reporting live at UTEP, Genevieve Curtis, the KFOX 14 Morning News.
Thanks, Genevieve. Again, the stacks are set to come down at about 6:45. 6:45 this morning, we expect it to look a little something like this. Explosives have been set at the base of the stacks and higher up. Now, once the dynamite is detonated, the stacks will fall like trees right into berms. Brian Kanoff with the El Paso Times took this photograph last week. It shows the landing area for those stacks. The biggest concern is lead dust, but officials say the stacks have been vacuumed and the berms should help contain the dust. There are almost 20 mist cannons, and those are going to throw 120 gallons of water per minute. That water will cover 300 feet and bind to the dust, bringing it down to the ground. Only 15-mile-per-hour sustained winds or 30-mile-per-hour gusts can really prevent today's demolition from happening.
Chief Meteorologist Sandra Diaz is closely monitoring those winds and how they might affect today's outcome. Sandra?
Well, it looks like the weather is looking fairly nice for the start of our day and for the demolition. We do have an area of low pressure that will push south of the area, but it's not going to do anything but keep us under partly cloudy skies for your morning. It pushes off to the east by the afternoon and things began to improve. So here's a look at the forecast for the demolition in the morning, and you'll see temperatures generally in the lower to mid 50s with north winds at about 5 to 10 miles per hour.
Thanks, Sandra. Now for the public safety, travel in the Asarco area is limited. KFOX 14 Morning News traffic anchor Lizette Garcia is in the traffic center this morning to show us what streets to make sure to avoid. Lizette?
That's right. I'm taking a look right now at I-10 and Brown, where you can see traffic is already starting to be reverted off the interstate of I-10. As you can see, this is I-10 and Brown. It started off about 10 minutes ago when traffic was out there. Everyone's just getting off. People are allowed to get on I-10 at Brown as well and go in the eastbound direction, but the westbound direction is no longer available to commuters. As we take a look at I-10 and Buena Vista, everything is completely shut down at this time, where you can see no traffic is moving in this direction. Stephanie?
Thanks, Lizette. It is now 6:11. The countdown is on this morning. The Asarco smokestacks will be coming down at about 6:45.
In fact, let's take you live. That's a live look for you. Over the last few weeks, many people have sent in photographs of the historic stacks, pictures that we'll be sharing with you before some of our commercial breaks. Plus,
we'll put a recreational corridor, a hiking, biking trail through them.
After Asarco, our special assignment into what is next for the smelter site. Plus,
it was more than lead, it was arsenic as well.
the soil, the air, and the scare, how a neighborhood brought down Asarco. You're watching In the Blast Zone, a KFOX 14 Morning News special. It's coverage you can count on.
Welcome back. Demolition of the Asarco stacks is set for about 6:45. That's about 30 minutes from now. KFOX 14 Morning News anchor John Purvis is the closest reporter to the site. John, tell us what's happening out there right now.
Well, Stephanie, right now I think everybody is taking a hard look at the smokestacks behind me, especially the red and white Asarco smokestack that towers 825 feet into the West El Paso skyline. It's such a part of our skyline and has been for nearly half a century that I think everybody is taking a close look at it one last time, because in a half hour's time, it's likely going to be gone and gone from our skyline forever. And I think all of us have like pictures or videos at home where the smokestack is in the background. It's part of our lives. It's a beacon for travelers who come from the west on I-10. It's also, for El Pasoans, a sign you're almost home, you're almost there. So I think right now folks are just taking a close look at the smokestacks this morning, because this is the last time the sun will rise on Asarco's iconic smokestacks. John Purvis, the KFOX 14 Morning News.
John, thank you. The demolition of the stacks is setting the stage for a geology lesson here in the borderland. Geologists from UTEP will use this weekend's demolitions at Asarco and also at City Hall to their advantage. 45 seismometers will measure ground movement, and they are set up between the demolition sites downtown and the Asarco site near UTEP. Some are as close as 600 feet to the demolition zones. Data gathered is going to help researchers gauge where seismic waves travel faster and slower in the ground.
We can get information on faults and any other probably unmapped structure underneath the area. Information that can be used also to estimate the response of El Paso area to an earthquake.
Now, the data will also show whether the East Franklin Mountain Fault ends below downtown El Paso or continues right into Juarez. Joining us now live here in the studio is Joshua Villalobos. He's a geology instructor at El Paso Community College.
And I'll tell you what, we want to talk about what Stephanie was just talking about a second ago on the blast impact. But first, the thing that we've heard so much is they're going to bury this rubble right there on ground. And a lot of people are worried about, is this going to have an impact on any groundwater in the area? What is your thoughts on that, possibly of a contamination?
Well, if we look at how much has already been put there on site over the past 120 years, you have all of that slag and heavy metal that's already on site. So the stacks coming down and any debris coming from today is really going to, again, just be a drop in the water compared to what's already on site.
So that's kind of an alarmist theory, you think, in your point, to worry about it too much?
I think so. You know, I think they're going to do a good job in terms of what they have on site right now to minimize any any extra contaminants getting in the air. So I don't see it's too much alarm.
How important is this information going to be to you that you gather?
Oh, I think any information that we're able to collect on El Paso's underground subsurface is very important for us, especially for the downtown area and the Asarco area. So we have a better understanding in terms of any aquifers there, or any faults that we have mapped to know exactly where they end if they splay off to other directions. So very important.
And just the impact of the stack coming down, hitting the ground, you will be able to get enough reverberation, I guess, from that to actually maybe determine what's right below the area?
We're hoping. We're hoping that.
And it's a free explosion.
Yeah, exactly. It's free energy. Right. So we're hoping that the impact is great enough to be able to record some information. So whether it's going to be from the actual stacks coming down or the buildings coming down or the actual explosion itself.
And quickly, your partners in Juarez are doing the same thing too.
Yes, so and they're also setting up their seismometers on their side, so maybe we can get a larger picture of what's going on.
All right.
Joshua Villalobos, we appreciate your expertise. Thank you. Steph.
Well, let's check back in with KFOX 14 Morning News reporter Genevieve Curtis. She is live at UTEP along Sunbold Drive. Genevieve?
Well, Stephanie, people started arriving here at UTEP at 6:30 p.m. last night, and they continue to arrive and fill the mountaintops, ready to see the Asarco smokestacks go down. And everyone has come armed with one of these smartphones, ready to make those memories and keep them. People are even here with their own cameras and camcorders. They're ready to record these and have these memories for a long time. Now, I talked to a lot of people. They woke up their kids at 4 a.m. this morning and brought them out here just so that they could be a part of this historical moment. We've talked a lot about the good and the bad and even the ugly at times about Asarco, but a lot of people here, it's a very celebratory feeling of wanting to celebrate the history of El Paso and this historic moment in time. Reporting live at UTEP, Genevieve Curtis, KFOX 14 Morning News.
Okay, Genevieve, thank you. Where we are today, awaiting this morning's demolition, really picked up speed basically within the last 8 years. Asarco worked with us just in a shell of a staff, trying to keep it going in this century, hoping that the copper prices would climb, and eventually they did. But that's when some West El Pasoans fought the plant's reopening. KFOX 14 Morning News reporter Bill Malusian visited with those who say their health is way more important than the money the plant could generate.
They did soil samples in the front and the back. They went down fairly deep, 6 inches, and if it tested positive, then you were eligible for remediation if you wanted it.
Lillian Worthman's soil tested positive for hazardous materials.
But it was more than lead, it was arsenic as well.
She says Asarco gave her a choice.
They would replace what you wanted or put in the rock. And I went ahead and maintained as much grass as I could. My parents, who live 2 blocks down the road, was also, they had their remediated as well.
We asked Lillian if she remembers having any health problems while Asarco was still in operation.
When we were in elementary school here at Mesita, definitely yes. Inability to run long distances, burning in the chest, yellowing of the leaves.
She says she is somewhat sentimental to see the towers go, but that it's time to leave the past behind. Do you guys feel Asarco did enough to kind of clean the neighborhood up?
I do.
Bill Malugin, the KFOX 14 Morning News.
Lillian also tells us that she doesn't have any concerns whatsoever about this morning's Asarco demolition, and she says she looks forward to having a natural view from her home. Well, just seeing those red and white stacks brings back a lot of memories for a lot of folks here in El Paso. KFOX 14 photojournalist John Traffenstead shows us how the people in the borderland are remembering the iconic Asarco smokestacks.
I could from the West Texas town of El Paso out to the Badlands of New Mexico.
The towers have been there for quite a bit. They were designed and built in the mid-1960s. If you go on Google, you'll find that it's in the top 25 in the world.
And the stacks are El Paso. It's a city landmark.
It's just something that reminds me of my home. And it's just like if it's in my front yard.
A lot of people love the stacks, and a lot of people hate the stacks. And those that love the stacks will be here trying to capture a last glimpse of them.
Imagine that it's a big tree trunk, cut a notch out with an axe. Essentially, that's what happens here. You use the explosives, fire the hole! And then it falls in the direction that you want.
And how will it fall?
It would fall kind of towards us, you know, away from the edge of the site, coming towards us. It would miss this building, and then this tower come kind of straight at us.
It's a memory. It's going to be very sad when it's gone.
And I am seeing I-10 is starting to shut down completely. As you can see, there is really no traffic flow at this time. Traffic is being exited at Sunland Park. You can get past that in either direction. You could get on that, go towards Las Cruces, but you can't go into town. You can't go into downtown. And I'm also seeing heavy buildup of traffic already on North Mesa Street. So if you need to get somewhere, North Mesa Street is starting to look a little busy. Executive Center Drive at this time is starting to close down, and Paisano, just remember, is completely shut down. Stephanie?
Thanks, Lizette. 6:24. Now we are closing in on the time of detonation.
In fact, here's a live look at the Asarco plant right now where we're expecting the dynamite to be touched off in just about 20 minutes. You have the best seat in the house. You're watching Inside the Blast Zone, KFOX 14 Morning News Special. Back right after the break. Welcome back, everyone. We're just about 15 minutes away. The anticipation building when the stacks are finally going to come down. Our coverage continues as we go back out to KFOX 14 news anchor Erica Castillo. She's live in West El Paso. Erica?
There were many efforts to stop the demolition of the Asarco smokestacks, but those failed, and a lot of those efforts were driven by former Asarco workers, many of whom, most of them here, who have suffered medical conditions that they believe is a direct result of them working in the smelter. Joining me now is Mario Nevares, who worked in the Mason department for 13 years. And a lot of the concern isn't so much from what is going to be emitted into the air when the smokestacks come down, but what is going to be going into the ground. Can you tell us a little bit about your concerns about that?
Yes, Erica. The thing is that when the stacks come down, it's not what is in the ground. The thing is that what actually is inside the smokestacks. All the contaminants that are inside the smokestacks is what concerns us, that it's going to be spreading into the groundwater, and the thing is that it's not natural materials, byproducts from the smelting of the ores, but it's materials that are byproducts of hazardous waste materials that were incinerated there at the plant.
All those years. And that, in a nutshell, is the major concern these Asarco workers, these former Asarco workers have. So right now, we are watching as the sun rises and the sun prepares to set on the smokestacks behind us. We're standing by here with several of the workers. Erica Castillo, KFOX 14 Morning News.
Right, Erica, thank you. And to echo what Mr. Nevadas was just saying, 2 former Asarco workers tell KFOX 14 that today's demolition, at least in their opinion, is a big mistake. They say the smokestack should just be left alone because of their fear of health concerns. Carlos Rodriguez and Daniel Ariano worry about the material they believe is still inside of those stacks. Ariano believes that his current health issues are directly linked to years of service at Asarco, and he worries about what will happen when the stacks finally fall into the area where an acid plant used to be.
A lot of the sulfuric acid, nitric acid used to seep into the ground for months. So, you know, that would eat your boots up just walking through little puddles of water that was in that area.
However, Asarco trustee Roberto Puga says extensive research and testing has been done in that area, and he believes there is no reason for concern.
The closing of Asarco has been coming for years now. The last day of production was back February 8th, 1999, and KFOX 14 was there at the copper smelter. Now at first, Asarco planned to scale down its staff for 3 years. Managers hoped an increase in the price of copper would make it profitable to begin again. The move meant hundreds of longtime employees were let go.
Felt like the Titanic was going down. It's a sad feeling, you know, because this is really a close-knit family here. Hopefully we'll run into each other here and there.
After it closed, about 32 workers were kept on to maintain that facility.
Well, here's a simple but very important question today. What does it take to bring down these enormous smokestacks? KFOX 14 Morning News reporter Bill Maluzhin gives us a look at the company who's responsible for bringing the stacks down safely.
Brandenburg Industrial Service Company is based out of Chicago. They're the ones who are going to bring down the smokestacks, the tallest in the world at the time that they were built. This is a video of a 550-foot smokestack that Brandenburg demolished when they were hired to decommission a coal plant. Along with bringing the facility down, they had to seal up coal and ash ponds. The Asarco smokestacks will bring a bigger challenge. Both stacks are much taller, and the possibility of hazardous materials inside make the demolition much more complicated. We reached out to Brandenburg to ask about their qualifications and their specific plan when it comes to Asarco, but we're told they can't talk to us.
For this particular project, we're not releasing any company information or project information. We're just not really bound by contract to do that at this point in time. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to decline on that.
He referred us to their website, where they provide a list of all the jobs they've completed and talk about the variety of services that they offer, including demolitions, environmental remediation, and site preparation. At a past open hall meeting, Brandenburg announced they will cut a hole into the base of the Asarco stacks, then use explosives to create a hinge and let gravity bring the towers down. Bill Maluzhin, the KFOX 14 Morning News.
Time now is 6:32. This morning's demolition will take down the largest smokestacks on the Asarco property, but they are not the first. A month after closing operations back in 1999, Asarco blew up its oldest smokestack at 300 feet tall. It took just 4 seconds for it to come down. But there was a problem. Look closely and you will see the tower fall to the right, hitting an abandoned building.
We had a very narrow area for it to go down in, and it did, when it came down, twisted just enough to hit one of our buildings. That building also is no longer used and will be demoed anyway.
The smokestack was designed to work with zinc material, and at the time of the demolition, the stack had not been in use since 1983. And in September 2011, another 300-foot stack was smashed. A bulldozer brought it tumbling down in just a few seconds.
And among those people who are most closely watching today's demolition are those people who lived there. At one time, hundreds of Asarco workers lived right there on the site. KFOX 14 Morning News reporter Veronica Macias visited La Calavera, homeowners who remained and were worried that today's demo will what it could do to their very old homes.
My uncle, who recently passed away during spring break, and he worked there. He was 84 years old, and he used to, towards the end, he was like one of the people that was maintenance and cleaning up, and you know, he's not going to be here to see it because it was going to break his heart to see it gone.
Adriana Ramirez lives in this neighborhood known as La Calavera. It's the last standing community of what was once known as Smelter Town, a town filled by Asarco workers and their families, people whose lives revolved around these smokestacks.
Most of these homes are made of adobe and rocks and from the mountain, and so in a way I'm glad, because if anything happens, they're going to take responsibility for it.
That's what residents were recently told by a trustee of the smokestacks in charge of the cleanup. People's homes here were inspected on Monday and will be checked again after the explosives rattle their homes. These residents have been through a lot. In the 1970s, Smelter Town vanished. It was deemed contaminated, yet those we spoke with don't fear the potential accumulation of dust here.
Like Mr. Puga says, they've already done the test, and there's no concern.
Besides the cracks on these already deteriorating homes, homeowners say they're not moving from their front yard views this weekend, even if there is an offer to stay at a hotel for free.
We don't want it to go, but we want to be here for the experience. We want to stay to watch it because it's something that means a lot. It's something that, well, it means a lot to us. It's a memory. It signifies where my family worked, and it's just something that reminds me of my home.
Veronica Macias, KFOX 14 Morning News.
Okay, we're about 10 minutes away from when the stacks finally come down, but we want to bring back a Asarco historian, Bernie Sargent, to talk a little bit more about what's going on this morning.
Yeah, Bernie, those stacks were up and running the year 1889, right? Yeah. Why El Paso?
Well, those specific stacks are fairly new by comparison. Right. They had older stacks that were much shorter, and yet tall compared to the rest of the country at the time. And the reason for Asarco being where it is, well, it's proximity to the trade route that was going east, west, north, and south. It kind of followed the same route that the Butterfield Trail followed, that the railroads followed. The railroad propagated massive growth of El Paso in what is, from 1881 to 1889, we had upwards of 7 or 8 railroads coming into El Paso, different lines. And so we had the rails available to transport the material into El Paso to be smeltered and transfer out to be manufactured or used in manufacturing.
Do you think people really understand how important of a role and how big and powerful El Paso was, say, 90 years ago?
I really don't think most people have a clue as to what El Paso was with, for the rest of the world. As far as Texas goes, we were the place that was happening at the time. We were growing, and it was just an amazing place to be at, El Paso. And yet, by comparison to the East Coast, where you had major manufacturing and you had all this technology, we were still Old West.
Yeah. We're going to keep talking to you even after the smokestacks come down. Okay. We're just a little less than 10 minutes out now.
We have some concerns about traffic because the interstate's shut down. Let's go to Lizette Garcia for a look at that. Lizette.
6:37 right now. We're taking a look at I-10 and Wrestler, where you can see semi-trucks. Everyone is just being diverted off at Sunland Park exit. This is my Wrestler cam, but you can see traffic is just completely off. Nobody is on I-10 in either direction as it is shut down from Sunland Park all the way to downtown. Let's go ahead and take a look at the surface street. We're taking a look at Mesa at Executive, where you can see traffic is it's free-flowing at this time. There are no delays on Mesa and Executive, so if you're heading out the door, you shouldn't have any problems at this time. But like I said, I-10 is completely shut down. Shelton?
All right, Lizette, thank you very much. As you've seen all morning, our crews are spread out throughout West El Paso.
Yeah, you've got the best seat in the house this morning. There's a ton of activity on our Facebook and Twitter pages. And we are just minutes away from the demolition. You are watching In the Blast Zone, a KFOX 14 Morning News Special. Welcome back. It is 6:41. You are looking at a live shot of the Asarco plant. Our KFOX 14 reporters and anchors spread all over West El Paso this morning. We are tweeting right along with our partner, the El Paso Times, all throughout today's historic event.
All right, honest question. Is your heart starting to race just a little bit for this?
We're just a couple of minutes away, you bet.
It is going to be incredible. It is time for the demolition of the Asarco smokestacks. It's expected to happen at any moment now.
That's right. We're going to go back out live to KFOX 14 news anchor John Purvis. John, tell us, are we going to hear a countdown right before the demolition?
Yes, there will be. And in fact, we're already running a couple of minutes late right now. There's going to be a gentleman with a red flag, and 5 minutes before the demolition begins, he's going to wave that red flag to give everybody the 5-minute warning. Then 3 minutes before the smokestack demolition actually begins, flares will go off to give us another warning. And then the 612 foot, the shorter smokestack will be the first to go down. That will be followed by the larger, the iconic red and white Asarco smokestack that stands over 825 feet tall. Now, I don't know if my photographer Adrian can zoom over a little bit or pan over to the misting water you see there. Now, when the towers come down in the next few minutes, they will fall into that misting area. Now, this total cost of the demolition is $2 million. Now, the actual explosives and the demolition part only cost $400,000. The other $1 million+ involved in this is going to try to reduce and control the dust levels. And the misters are a huge part of that. They've literally been putting out thousands of gallons of water. And so these towers, when they come down, will kind of land in mud. It'll serve as a pillow. There are also chemicals out there that are supposed to reduce the dust, both on the ground and also in the towers themselves. There's some type of adhesive material that's supposed to reduce the dust. Of course, we'll see how all this works when the towers all come down. Now, we're over in the media area and also a VIP area on the south side of Executive Center near Paisano Drive. Not a lot of people here, except of course for the media and several VIPs watching this. But on the north side of the freeway in the hills near UTEP and over on Executive Center, there are literally hundreds of people lined up to watch the Asarco smokestacks come down. So we're here as well, and we're just waiting for the gentleman with the red flag to give us the all clear that we're 5 minutes away. Stephanie, Shelton.
You know what, John, a couple questions while we have you out there. And can you hear me all right, first of all, John? Okay.
I can.
Some people are concerned or are wondering just how this demolition will happen, because you see different things, and with City Hall it's going to be an implosion. But can you explain just how these stacks are supposed to fall, kind of like a tree, correct?
Absolutely. It's the way Asarco trustee Roberto Puga explained it to me is it's like chopping down a tree, except instead of an axe chopping down the tree, it will be 300 pounds of dynamite chopping down these smokestacks. And again, the smaller smokestack will be the first to come down, and it should take about, after we hear the blast, and he says the blast won't actually be that loud or that impressive. It won't be like the City Hall implosion, but it'll take about another 10 seconds before gravity takes its course and the tower begins crumbling down. Then about 10 seconds after that, the other, much taller Asarco tower will come down after that. And again, it'll take about 10 seconds, maybe a little bit longer with the larger smokestack, because again, it's that much bigger, takes gravity that much more, and then it will come down right after the smaller smokestack. So again, the whole thing should probably take less than a minute once they get going. And again, we're just waiting around here for what's happening. We have several helicopters. We had a Customs and Border Protection helicopter circling the area, and other helicopters in the area. And I'm sure a lot of these aircraft are also looking to get great pictures of what's happening here, as well as being involved in security and making sure that the area is ready for the demolition this morning.
John, another quick question for you. When these stacks do come down, how big or how little are the chunks going to be when they hit the ground?
You know, that's hard to say. I've heard that there's going to be some large chunks, and in fact, Roberto Puga has also told me that some of the large chunk, or a large chunk, will be preserved so that we always have some memorial to the Asarco smokestack, but it'll be a combination. It'll be both small parts and very large parts. So I'm not sure exactly how that's all going to happen, but once the smokestacks come down, we should see for ourselves.
Yeah, plus there's a ton of rebar up in there, so how it's going to break apart, we don't really know. John, take a look around from your vantage point and tell us about crowd sizes and maybe gawkers that you have out there. What's it like as a crowd size?
You know, actually, I'm surprised, like in the VIP area, there aren't that many people. That's to my left over here, and there's, you know, a couple of dozen people watching over there. And there's also quite a few people here in the media area. All the local stations are represented, and some out-of-town media as well. But there's not a large crowd. However, if you go to the other side, the north side of I-10 on Executive Center, where they have some hotels and things like that, and also over by UTEP and the hills around there, there are large groups of people who have gathered to check out the smokestacks coming down this morning.
John, now you've been in this area for a long time here in the borderland. On a personal note, what is it like for you to see these stacks come down?
Well, you know, I spent most of my career here in El Paso. I first arrived here in 1992, and I've always lived and worked on the west side of El Paso. And the smokestack, especially the red and white smokestack behind me, you always use it as a point of reference when you're driving around El Paso or when you're walking. It's always been part of our background here in El Paso, and I always know, I'm always thankful when I'm on the highway coming from just about any direction. When I see the Asarco smokestack, I know I'm close to home, and I think that's true for a lot of people. No matter what you think about Asarco or its history, and some folks are thrilled to see it come down. Other folks think, no, we're destroying history. I think a lot of El Pasoans will miss it just simply because it's familiar. It's been a part of our lives for so long, and I think we'll notice once this smokestack comes down, I think we'll where's it at? I think it'll take us a little while. I think there'll be a mourning period for a period of time as we adjust to life without the Asarco smokestack in our skyline.
You know, while we're on the sentimental journey there, John, you and I dare to say that we've worked together a long time. About 20 years ago we started, and I too have driven by those smokestacks a million times. But what I have noticed in the past couple of weeks is they really stand out to me now. It's like an old friend. I notice them even more. Are you having the same feelings?
Absolutely. In fact, I was mentioning that earlier, how people are really taking a hard look at the smokestack this morning. I mean, I think more than usual, because it's always been such a part of our lives, the background in our lives, and we could always see it. In fact, yesterday evening, I went for a walk outside of the KFOX 14 studio, and I made it a point of noticing the smokestack, because I said, in a matter of hours, it's going to disappear from that skyline, and I'm not going to see it anymore as a reference point as I walk around West El Paso.
Indeed, we are just minutes away from a huge change to El Paso's skyline. Now, John, weather, a lot of people were worried about that. Any wind out there right now?
No, actually the winds have calmed down substantially. Now, when we first got here, and we got here just after 5 this morning, the winds were pretty strong, and I actually thought they might actually play a role in whether the stacks come down. But right now, the winds are actually very calm, much calmer than they were this morning, because there was a pretty steady wind, I would say about 10 to 15 miles per hour. And I've heard that if the winds get above 15 miles per hour, that might cause a delay or might cause some trepidation about whether they're going to go forward with it. But right now, there's very little wind to speak of. It's very calm right now. We're still waiting for the gentleman with the red flag to go ahead and wave it, but I see Roberto Puga over there walking around. I think he's on the phone, so something may be happening right now, but I assume we're still close. I haven't heard otherwise about the stacks not coming down. As far as I know, everything's still a go.
Just to update our viewers.
But we are late.
Yes, to update our viewers, to get to that point, John, you're watching the KFOX 14 Morning News inside the blast zone.
Here we go with the flag. So sorry, Shelton, the flag is up now, so that should mean that we're 5 minutes away from the Asarco smokestacks coming down. Now, what should happen in a couple of minutes here is flares will fire off, and then it will be 3 minutes until the smokestacks actually come down. And again, the smaller 600-foot smokestack, that used to be used in the lead smelter here at Asarco. It hasn't been used since 1985. That's the last time they smelted lead here. And then, of course, the iconic red and white Asarco smokestack that stands over 825 feet. That's equivalent of a 70-story building. That'll come down after the smaller smokestack. And again, it should all be happening within the next 5 minutes. Stephanie, Shelton?
All right, John, to let you know, that stack went up on our clocks here at the station at about 6:50 straight up, so we can keep a pretty good eye on it for you to help you out with some of the timing and see how well they can stick with that. We have about 3 or 4 minutes before we really get to the nitty-gritty. Can you tell me, can you look back at the berms that they've installed, and are those water cannons already going, the misters already going? Because dust control is a really big issue today.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in fact, if Adrian can zoom in on those again, those have been going all morning. And I think they were even going yesterday and the days before. I think at the end of this, they said they're going to put something like 500,000 gallons of water on the drop zone where the towers are going to fall. So yes, water is going to be a huge part of it. And there, the flare just went off on, so we should be just 3 minutes away from the Asarco smokestacks coming down.
All right, John, and again, just for our viewers, a reminder that it's not going to happen instantaneously, right? It's going to take a little while for those stacks to come down.
Yes, well, Roberto Puga was telling me that just based on gravity, that you'll hear a boom of some type, and it won't be that loud, maybe about as loud as those flares were, and then it'll take about 10 seconds before the tower actually comes down. He says gravity takes a little while, and then it should, you know, fall down like a tree into that area where you see the misters. And at that point, then we should see how much dust it produces and everything like that. But again, they're spending $2 million, or as much as $2 million on this demolition, and the majority of that money has nothing to do with the actual demolition itself. It's all about the dust control, and that's what these misters are about, and also some chemicals they put on the ground to keep the dust down as much as possible. They've even put some type of adhesive material inside the smokestacks themselves to try to make sure that there's as little dust as possible. And again, there'll be all kinds of pieces that fall from this. There'll be large chunks, there'll be small chunks, and Roberto Puga says at least one large chunk will be preserved as a reminder of what was here and what was such a huge part of El Paso's skyline for so many years. The iconic Asarco smokestack, the red and white one, went up in 1966 and officially began smelting copper in January of 1967. So, and it last operated in 1999. So it's iconic part of our skyline about to disappear.
John, let me interrupt you a little bit. I know you got a million things going on. We're following closely on the clock. If they schedule right on to 3 minutes and it stays true to form, we are about 1 minute, 10 seconds away. I know you're juggling a lot and you can't look at a clock there, but according to our clock, it would fall at 6:53:30, and we are now exactly 1 minute away from the scheduled demolition of the first Asarco stack.
And it must have been planned this way because I can just see now the sun is just starting to shine. Even though the sun actually rose about 15 minutes ago, the sun is just now starting to shine on the Asarco smokestacks. So I guess this is kind of the way they had it planned so that you could get a spectacular view.
All right, guys, I'll tell you what, John, we're just going to sit there and watch because we should be about 30 seconds away from history here in the Borderland.
Unbelievable sight there.
Wow, it was. We even felt a little blowback from the large smokestack as the explosion occurred. So it was quite an experience to be out here and to watch it this closely. We're probably just a couple of thousand feet from the location.
John, we could hear people hooping and hollering, if you will.
Oh yeah, it's spectacular. We've got people of all ages out here, and it's an incredible sight. It is producing a lot of dust, as you can see, but it looks like it went flawless. They went down just as they were supposed to and fell into the drop zone that they were supposed to, and it looked fine, and it went down very smoothly.
And John, tell us a little bit more about that dust cloud. I don't want to get caught up too much in the moment. As far as demolitions go, that was really an incredible thing to see, but we can already see the dust cloud making it all the way over to, Lizette Garcia, help me, is that an I-10 shot there? Okay, that is Interstate 10. So John, I don't know your vantage point, but the dust cloud has already made it all the way to I-10. How far and quickly is this thing spreading?
I can't really see to I-10. We're kind of blocked. We have a hill in our way between us and I-10. However, what I do notice is there's very little wind right now. And what I'm seeing is the dust is just sort of standing there in the air. There's nothing to kind of blow it away, so it's kind of stagnant. perhaps what we've got this morning is some type of inversion that's going on. And as you know, when that happens, a lot of times the dust will stick and kind of stagnate, and perhaps that's what's happening this morning, because it appears to us like a cloud. It's not really moving much or anything like that. It's just this slowly moving cloud of dust and debris.
John, we've got a different vantage point here in the studio, and we can see that cloud moving over I-10. There it is. This is I-10 in Asarco, and this is exactly why they wanted to shut down this stretch of roadway this morning.
You know what? The good news, Steph, is that doesn't look like it's too bad, because there was a big worry about how long it would take them to clean it up before we could get the interstate open again. Lizette Garcia is keeping a close eye on that for us, so she'll let us know if there's any problems there. But John, can you tell if those water cannons are having much of any impact on the cloud so far?
You know, no. And I mean, if you look at the height of or if viewers at home were seeing the height of the misters earlier, it's nowhere near as tall as this cloud is. It basically looks like in the area that stretches over to Juarez on the other side of Paisano and the Rio Grande, it really looks like it's kind of covered in a mist, in a fog right now. And it's just slowly starting to settle across the area. But it does look like it mostly went flawlessly from our perspective here.
I tell you what, it almost looks like the San Francisco Bay out there right now, doesn't it, John?
A little bit.
Okay, I'll tell you what, we'll check back in with John Purvis in just a second on what has really been an incredible day. Erica Castillo is out on the west side, where she's gathered with some people who used to work at Asarco for a long time, and I bet you they have a very unique perspective on this. Erica?
There's something very symbolic about to happen here. You know, these workers have described what just happened as a funeral, and very symbolic and in line with what you might see at a funeral. They're about to release 2 pigeons, and Danny Ariano, who's a third-generation former Asarco worker, is going to describe what's happening here as these former Asarco workers and their grandchildren do this very special symbolic thing.
Yes, good morning, El Paso, and good morning, region. We're workers from Asarco, and I'm third generation, and a lot of the workers here earn their living and good benefits, good insurance, and everything. There's good and bad. And a lot of us came out sick, some of us didn't, but the unfortunate did. So we're gonna release the black pigeon for the people with the misfortunes, and that's gonna represent the bad, and the white's gonna represent given to the youth for a new start and a new beginning and a better El Paso and a better region. Okay, you guys. 1, 2.
He's going back to Asarco.
Going around. There you go. Go. 1. Ready? Ready? Go. Do it. Really?
And there they go. As many of the workers here said, John and Stephanie, from dust to dust. Reporting live in West Central El Paso, Erica Castillo, KFOX 14 Morning News.
All right, thank you, Erica.
It is now 7 o'clock. We're taking a live look at I-10 in Asarco. There you can see some of that dust cloud still moving across the freeway.
KFOX 14 Morning News anchor Lizette Garcia is keeping a very close eye on that. She's going to have a report, the latest report, coming up in just a second. But if we can now, let's head back out to the UTEP area.
Yeah, that's right. KFOX 14 Morning News reporter Genevieve Curtis is there to tell us how it looked from her perspective. Genevieve.
Well, Stephanie, it looked like the smokestacks were absolutely coming at us from this vantage point. From sitting up on the UTEP Mountains, the largest stack looked like it was about to just hit the mountain the way it was coming at us. It was absolutely an incredible sight. Right before the stack drop, there was absolutely no noise. Everyone stood just waiting to see what was going to happen. It was an incredible moment as the stacks began to fall. People did whatever they could do to get their best vantage point. I just want to show you right now, there are actually people paragliding up in the sky, trying to get the best view that they possibly can of what was happening here. It was an incredibly historic moment, and as you can see, the dust cloud right now is just rising up and really filling the sky. You cannot see very far past where the stacks used to stand as that dust cloud continues to go up. and rise. We were just absolutely mesmerized by what was happening out here. So many people took so many photos and video to have this moment and record this moment so that they'll remember it for a very long time. Reporting live at UTEP, Genevieve Curtis, KFOX 14, the KFOX 14 Morning News.
Thanks, Genevieve. 7:01. Now we want to take another look at the demolition of the Asarco smokestacks. Such an emotional day for everybody. There certainly got to be the engineers have to be happy with this.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of preparation that they had to do it. In fact, we're going to turn around a bunch of this video. We have crews that are spread out all over the borderland, so we have a lot of different angles that we're working to put together for you, and we're going to bring it to you just a little bit later. Actually, do we have it right now? We do. Let's go ahead and take a roll of this and show you what's going on out there. Oh, they lied to me. Now I'm falling down like a smokestack. I'll tell you what, one of the big stories here is the interstate, how that's doing. Let's go over to Lizette Garcia. She has the latest on that. Lizette? Lizette, are you there?
I am here. I'm here, Shelton. I'm taking a look outside. I mean, just imagine. Can you really imagine driving through this? This is why, exactly why they shut down I-10 so that nobody has to go through this. There was some spectators on the side of the road there. Authorities were out there getting them out of the way. Now inspectors are going to go out here in about 15 minutes to make sure that I-10 is safe to reopen to all drivers. But this is I-10 around Asarco at this time. Stacks fell down a few minutes ago, and this is what it still looks like. This dust has not cleared yet. We're going to go ahead and wait for that. There isn't enough wind to help this clear any faster, but authorities are out there making sure that everything is going to be clear, and inspectors will be out there in about 15 minutes to make sure that I-10 is all clear to drive on. Shelton?
All right, thank you very much. Let's go ahead and take that video, look at that video that we just promised you, the explosion, the stacks coming down, and it kind of felt like it was a tree in slow motion.
Yeah, take a look. The small one was the one that came down first. It was followed immediately by a small explosion to the fracture to the back of the stack, and there you can see it coming down.
That's the little brother, the 600-footer there, the old lead stack, and it goes down very slowly. And what you see on the Asarco stack, as we turn it around there was actually a big explosion at the base in the area that they wanted it to fall. And then there was a smaller explosion basically on the backside, on the spine, and they had already cut out all the rebar on that to begin with to kind of fracture it. And that's how they were able to make it land as accurately as they did.
Yeah, they have to be happy with this. And certainly we did hear some shouts coming from the crowd, and with this fall here, the end of an era for the Asarco copper smelter.
Incredible to see.
7:04 now. If you suffer from breathing problems, we're going to have some steps to protect yourself from today's demolition.
Very important. That word's coming up next. Plus, we're going back out to live to John Purvis in just a moment. Inside the Blast Zone continues right after the break.
News doesn't stop on Friday night. Turn to the team working throughout the weekend, devoted to bringing you what's new, what's now, and what's next. First on the scene of breaking news, uncovering the big stories of the day, tracking severe weather all weekend long, and you get it all an hour before anyone else. KFOX 14 News at 9, weekends, coverage you can count on.
Now's a great time to buy a new Ford truck from Shamali Ford. Save up to $10,000 on new Ford trucks. For example, get up to $10,000 in total savings on a new 2013 Ford F-150 Texas Edition Super Crew. That's $10 grand in savings on a new Ford Super Crew. And this is a new 2013, not a 2012. Shamali Ford is your truck authority. So check out ShamaliFord.com for more great offers. Shamali Ford, right on the corner. And now, more than ever, right on the price.
At GECU, 1% makes a difference. 1% means more room for memories and for the little things that truly matter. We're waiving our 1% loan origination fee because it can make the difference between dreaming of a home and owning one. The Waive and Save sale from GECU, now through April 13th. Welcome home, El Paso.
El Paso skyline will change forever after this weekend. While the demolitions have caused different reactions from the public, there is one other kind of demolition that can't be argued with. The Biba Auto Group
to come down.
for the KFOX 14 Severe Winter Team. Coverage you can count on.
Welcome back, everyone. For more than a century, the Asarco smelter was the engine of economic growth here in El Paso, but now that Asarco's dismantling, it will make way for a new economic engine.
KFOX 14 news anchor John Purvis live in West El Paso. John?
Yeah, Stephanie and Shelton, as the dust cloud continues to settle behind me, I actually talked to the Asarco site trustee Roberto Puga for the first time more than a year ago, because the smokestacks were actually scheduled to come down last February, or in February of last year. That didn't happen. He put that on hold because people were trying to preserve the smokestacks. But I asked him about what's next for Asarco and what's in the future for this area and what will be preserved here. Before it closed in 1999, the Asarco copper smelter employed 400 people and pumped $300 million into El Paso's economy. It also caused a lot of environmental damage, like elevated lead levels in the soil of the Sunset Heights and Kern Place neighborhoods, from its days as a lead smelter. A community that was once home to thousands of Asarco workers and their families, Smelter Town also had to shut down in the 1970s because its children were contaminated with lead. El Pasoans of a certain age also remember the stench the smelter could produce.
Sulfur. And when we used to live there too, man. Yeah, used to smell a lot. Like, I don't know if it was gas or something like that, but it was bad.
Just a few years ago, Asarco tried to reopen the smelter because of high copper prices, something El Paso city leaders fought every step of the way.
Once we prevented them from getting their permit renewed, then the company went into bankruptcy. We had a very small claim in the bankruptcy court. But as a result of that, we were able to get $52 million out of the bankruptcy court just for the remediation of the site.
The smelter closed for good, and a crew of 20 demolished most of what remained, while a trustee, Roberto Puga, oversees Asarco's destruction and the creation of something new.
Foremost, my job is to remediate the site and make it safe for human health and environment.
Puga is a professional geologist with Project Navigator Limited, which took over as Asarco's trustee. He says one of the reasons the stacks will come down is cost. Making sure the stacks meet today's standards for withstanding earthquakes is simply too costly. Though the stacks won't be saved, some parts of Asarco will remain. Among the handful of buildings that will be preserved here is Asarco's main office building. It was the first structure to go up on the smelter site, built in 1887 with 2-foot-thick adobe walls. Puga also hoped to spare Asarco's old powerhouse from demolition. It has unique electrical equipment dating back more than a century, but he now says it also may prove too expensive to preserve. As this time-lapse video shows, much of what was Asarco has disappeared since the demolition began last May. The sale of scrap metal and copper remnants collected during demolition is adding millions of dollars to the remediation budget. Once the buildings that you need to destroy are all gone, and the towers, talk about then what's going to happen.
Well, we have to do a surface soils remediation. There's a lot of metals in the soils here that have to be covered with an engineered cover. A lot of the hazardous waste have to be housed in a landfill that we're going to build.
All the hazardous materials will be buried on site. Then the arroyos will be restored to their original natural state. Puga promises a lot of green space in whatever comes after Asarco.
And then we'll put a recreational corridor, hiking, biking trail through them, which will open up a recreational corridor from Paisano all the way over to Mesa, which does not exist now.
The property actually straddles the Interstate 10 and comes up onto the mountain. So it's quite a large site to have to be remediated.
And Puga tells me everything is on schedule to complete the remediation by the end of 2015, and then he plans to put the land up for sale in 2016. Reporting live in West El Paso, John Purvis, the KFOX 14 Morning News.
John, thank you very much.
Also, today's demolition may affect those with breathing problems. One local expert says as long as the dust suppression techniques worked, then it really shouldn't be any worse than just one of the regular windy days here in the borderland. In fact, the company taking down the smokestacks actually used 2 levels of precautions. One was a layer of imported clean soil. I know that sounds odd, but it's clean, so that the dust kicked up was primarily from that clean soil, not any of the polluted soil below. And those water mist cannons that we showed you, which really helped to reduce reduce the dust cloud much more quickly.
And it is not just what's in the air. Many El Pasoans are also concerned about the bricks in the stacks, which they believe hold chemicals. KFOX 14 talked to a geologist who teaches at El Paso Community College about those concerns. We first introduced you to Joshua Villalobos at the beginning of this newscast. He doesn't see more damage being done than what was caused by more than a century of smelting heavy metals. Those metals included copper, arsenic, and lead.
If they do a good job of lining it and covering it with asphalt, then there's no chance of water hitting it, seeping back into the groundwater, into the river. So, you know, I can't imagine the smokestacks being any worse than what's already there on site.
Villalobos says that the seismic waves UTEP geologists plan to record will help them map the underground terrain beneath both Asarco and City Hall. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has issued this statement. EPA administrators believe steps have been taken to protect both the environment and people living in the area. The EPA has people on site right now, and they are there to make sure the Asarco trustee complies with the approved plan.
Well, the Asarco towers fell just about 25 minutes ago, and from John Purvis's site, there was actually some cheers that could be heard, but it's kind of a different situation at the scene where KFOX 14 news anchor Erica Castillo is this morning. Erica?
Well, there are former Asarco workers here from all different levels at working at the smelter. There were some who were deep in the trenches, and then there were those who had more farther back positions. There are many different experiences that I've heard about here today, stories from severe strokes and debilitation to people who were able to put their kids through college. But regardless of that, everybody here was emotional. And I was standing next to Pat Garza, and I couldn't help but notice it seemed like your heart jumped into your throat at the moment that the smokestacks went down.
Yes, it was real mind-boggling when it happened. When it happened, everything was like all the work we've done in the past few years trying to get our testing done for our situation that we're involved with. It's like it's gone away. And I look back right now, I look over to the right, you can still see smoke dissipating onto the public right now, going towards UTEP, so it's been inhaled, and nobody from UTEP has respirators and etc. protected. What about that? That's kind of what stuff we were exposed to at Asarco. And I just wanted to show real quick, is just that this right here is from the last pour at Asarco, from the last pour, the central anode. Everyone who got laid off in 1999 got a piece of this copper here, the anode. So this is something I'm just carrying with me so everybody can see this is the last pour from Asarco.
Thank you, Pat. And Pat carries that in his pocket every day in a little felt container, and he's carrying a lot more than that around with him every day, as a lot of these former Asarco workers are. And they say even though those smokestacks are gone, this fight is not over. Reporting live in West Central El Paso, Erica Castillo, KFOX 14 Morning News.
Thank you, Erica. 7:15 now. Joining us one last time is the Asarco historian, Bernie Sargent. We could see there was a lot of emotion out there where Erica was. What was it like for you when you were watching these two smokestacks come down?
Well, there was emotion here in the studio, too. Yeah. I was sitting in the production, the boss's room, and we all have pretty much the same feeling. It's like a piece of El Paso is gone. So, you know, we can reminisce, we can talk about it, but if you look at some of these pictures, you know, certainly it wasn't the most appealing looking site, but it was also way out on the outskirts of town at one time, and we just kind of grew around it. So, yeah, we will miss it.
Bernie, I hate to do this to you. I only got about 30 seconds, but give me a quick thing on what happens in the future, primarily with the soil.
Well, the soil, they're going to raise the whole level up 5 feet, so they're bringing in soil, clean soil, and that means they also have to raise the building up, the office, the old 1887 building. We're working right now with the trustee to move that piece of structure over closer to the base of where the large chimney is, and then create a little historic site.
All right, I'll tell you what, Bernie,
happens.
It was great seeing you again. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Best of luck. I'll tell you what, we still got an issue on I-10 because that dust cloud is not going away. Lizette?
I'll see you in the morning.
About 25 minutes at this time, as you can see, I-10 and Schuster is just kind of at a standstill at this point. Dust cloud is not moving whatsoever. Crews are out there trying to take a look at this. Cars are starting to be allowed back on the expressway heading eastbound on Schuster. but as you can see, it's not really moving. Crews are going to go out there. We still need to get that all clear so that traffic could be completely free-flowing on I-10 between downtown and Sunland Park, but at this time it's still shut down, and as you can see, the dust is settling, but it's not clearing up. Stephanie?
Thanks, Lizette. 7:17 now. Well, despite the stacks coming down, there are still pieces of history left on that site. The future for the building that once housed Asarco's main office.
I'll tell you what, it's been quite a morning. We really appreciate you tuning in to KFOX 14 Inside the Blast Zone. The big one came down about 25 minutes ago. Our coverage continues right after the break. Welcome back, everyone. For more than a century, the Asarco smelter was the engine of economic growth here in El Paso. But now that Asarco's dismantling, it will make way for a new economic engine.
KFOX 14 News anchor John Purvis live in West El Paso. John?
Yeah, Stephanie and Shelton, as the dust cloud continues to settle behind me, I actually talked to the Asarco site trustee Roberto Puga for the first time more than a year ago, because the smokestacks were actually scheduled to come down last February, or February of last year. That didn't happen. He put that on hold because people were trying to preserve the smokestacks. But I asked him about what's next for Asarco and what's in the future for this area and what will be preserved here. Before it closed in 1999, the Asarco copper smelter employed 400 people and pumped $300 million into El Paso's economy. It also caused a lot of environmental damage, like elevated lead levels in the soil of the Sunset Heights and Kern Place neighborhoods, from its days as a lead smelter. A community that was once home to thousands of Asarco workers and their families, Smelter Town also had to shut down in the 1970s because its children were contaminated with lead. El Pasoans of a certain age also remember the stench the smelter could produce.
Sulfur. And when we used to live there too, man. Yeah, used to smell a lot. Like, I don't know if it was gas or something like that, but it was bad.
Just a few years ago, Asarco tried to reopen the smelter because of high copper prices, something El Paso city leaders fought every step of the way.
Once we prevented them from getting their permit renewed, then the company went into bankruptcy. We had a very small claim in the bankruptcy court. But as a result of that, we were able to get $52 million out of the bankruptcy court just for the remediation of the site.
The smelter closed for good, and a crew of 20 demolished most of what remained, while a trustee, Roberto Puga, oversees Asarco's destruction and the creation of something new.
Foremost, my job is to remediate the site and make it safe for human health and environment.
Puga is a professional geologist with Project Navigator Limited, which took over as Asarco's trustee. He says one of the reasons the stacks will come down is cost. Making sure the stacks meet today's standards for withstanding earthquakes is simply too costly. Though the stacks won't be saved, some parts of Asarco will remain. Among the handful of buildings that will be preserved here is Asarco's main office building. It was the first structure to go up on the smelter site, built in 1887 with 2-foot-thick adobe walls. Puga also hoped to spare Asarco's old powerhouse from demolition. It has unique electrical equipment dating back more than a century, but he now says it also may prove too expensive to preserve. As this time-lapse video shows, much of what was Asarco has disappeared since the demolition began last May. The sale of scrap metal and copper remnants collected during demolition is adding millions of dollars to the remediation budget. Once the buildings that you need to destroy are all gone, and the towers, talk about then what's going to happen.
Well, we have to do a surface soils remediation. There's a lot of metals in the soils here that have to be covered with an engineered cover. A lot of the hazardous waste have to be housed in a landfill that we're going to build.
All the hazardous materials will be buried on site. Then the arroyos will be restored to their original natural state. Puga promises a lot of green space in whatever comes after Asarco.
And then we'll put a recreational corridor, hiking, biking trail through them, which will open up a recreational corridor from Paisano all the way over to Mesa, which does not exist now.
The property actually straddles the Interstate 10 and comes up onto the mountain. So it's quite a large site to have to be remediated.
And Puga tells me everything is on schedule to complete the remediation by the end of 2015, and then he plans to put the land up for sale in 2016. Reporting live in West El Paso, John Purvis, the KFOX 14 Morning News.
John, thank you very much.
Also, today's demolition may affect those with breathing problems. One local expert says as long as the dust suppression techniques worked, then it really shouldn't be any worse than just one of the regular windy days here in the borderland. In fact, the company taking down the smokestacks actually used 2 levels of precautions. One was a layer of imported clean soil. I know that sounds odd, but it's clean, so that the dust kicked up was primarily from that clean soil, not any of the polluted soil below. And those water mist cannons that we showed you, which really helped to reduce the dust cloud much more quickly.
And it is not just what's in the air. Many El Pasoans are also concerned about the bricks in the stacks, which they believe hold chemicals. KFOX 14 talked to a geologist who teaches at El Paso Community College about those concerns. We first introduced you to Joshua Villalobos at the beginning of this newscast. He doesn't see more damage being done than what was caused by more than a century of smelting heavy metals. Those metals included copper, arsenic, and lead.
If they do a good job of lining it and covering it with asphalt, then there's no chance of water hitting it, seeping back into the groundwater, into the river. So, you know, I can't imagine the smokestacks being any worse than what's already there on site.
Villalobos says that the seismic waves UTEP geologists plan to record will help them map the underground terrain beneath both Asarco and City Hall. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has issued this statement. EPA administrators believe steps have been taken to protect both the environment and people living in the area. The EPA has people on site right now, and they are there to make sure the Asarco trustee complies with the approved plan.
Well, the Asarco towers fell just about 25 minutes ago, and from John Purvis's site, there was actually some cheers that could be heard, but it's kind of a different situation at the scene where KFOX 14 news anchor Erica Castillo is this morning. Erica?
Well, there are former Asarco workers here from all different levels at working at the smelter. There were some who were deep in the trenches, and then there were those who had more farther back positions. There are many different experiences that I've heard about here today, stories from severe strokes and debilitation to people who were able to put their kids through college. But regardless of that, everybody here was emotional. And I was standing next to Pat Garza, and I couldn't help but notice it seemed like your heart jumped into your throat at the moment that the smokestacks went down.
Yes, it was real mind-boggling when it happened. When it happened, everything was like all the work we've done in the past few years trying to get our testing done for our situation that we're involved with. It's like it's gone away. And I look back right now, I look over to the right, you can still see smoke dissipating onto the public right now, going towards UTEP, so it's been inhaled, and nobody from UTEP has respirators and etc. protected. What about that? That's kind of what stuff we were exposed to at Asarco. And I just wanted to show real quick, is just that this right here was from the last pour at Asarco, from the last pour, the central anode. Everyone who got laid off in 1999 got a piece of this copper here, the anode. So this is something I'm just carrying with me so everybody can see this is the last pour from Asarco.
Thank you, Pat. And Pat carries that in his pocket every day in a little felt container, and he's carrying a lot more than that around with him every day, as a lot of these former Asarco workers are. And they say even though those smokestacks are gone, this fight is not over. Reporting live in West Central El Paso, Erica Castillo, KFOX 14 Morning News.
Thank you, Erica. 7:15 now. Joining us one last time is the Asarco historian, Bernie Sargent. We could see there was a lot of emotion out there where Erica was. What was it like for you when you were watching these 2 smokestacks come down?
Well, there was emotion here in the studio, too. Yeah. I was sitting in the production, the boss's room, and we all have pretty much the same feeling. It's like a piece of El Paso is gone. So, you know, we can reminisce, we can talk about it, but if you look at some of these pictures, you know, certainly it wasn't the most appealing looking site, but it was also way out on the outskirts of town at one time, and we just kind of grew around it. So, yeah, we will miss it.
Bernie, I hate to do this to you. I only got about 30 seconds,
sure.
But give me a quick thing on what happens in the future, primarily with the soil.
Well, the soil, they're going to raise the whole level up 5 feet, so they're bringing in soil, clean soil, and that means they also have to raise the building up, the office, the old 1887 building. We're working right now with the trustee to move that piece of structure over closer to the base of where the large chimney is, and then create a little historic site.
All right, I'll tell you what, Bernie,
happens.
It was great seeing you again. Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Best
Thank
of luck.
you.
I'll tell you what, we still got an issue on I-10 because that dust cloud is not going away. Lizette?
I'll see you in the morning.
About 25 minutes at this time, as you can see, I-10 and Schuster is just kind of at a standstill at this point. The dust cloud is not moving whatsoever. Crews are out there trying to take a look at this. Cars are starting to be allowed back on the expressway heading eastbound on Schuster. But as you can see, it's not really moving. Crews are going to go out there. We still need to get that all clear so that traffic could be completely free-flowing on I-10 between downtown and Sunland Park. But at this time, it's still shut down. And as you can see, the dust is settling, but it's not clearing up. Stephanie?
Thanks, Lizette. 7:17 now. Well, despite the stacks coming down, there are still pieces of history left on that site. The future for the building that once housed Asarco's main office.
I'll tell you what, it's been quite a morning. We really appreciate you tuning in to KFOX 14 Inside the Blast Zone. The big one came down about 25 minutes ago. Our coverage continues right after the break. Welcome back, everyone. History in the borderland today. 25 minutes ago, the last of the two smokestacks at Asarco finally came down. KFOX 14 Morning News reporter Genevieve Curtis is live in West El Paso. And Genevieve, that smoke cloud is not, or dust cloud rather, is not dissipated much, has it?
No, Shelton, actually, we're in the middle of the dust cloud right now. Earlier, this entire area was filled with people here to watch the stacks drop, and it has completely cleared out, as you can see behind me, because that dust cloud just kept moving, and now we are really in the middle of it. It has a very distinct smell. Some people say it smells like sulfur. Other people are like, I don't know what it smells like, I just don't like it. And when it's hard, I mean, it's hard to see, it's hard to even breathe a little bit inside this dust cloud. When the stacks came down, you could feel the boom here, the ground, you could feel it just shake just a little bit. And people, as the stacks were coming down from the vantage point here in UTEP, people were saying, no, it's going the wrong way, it's going the wrong way. But it all seems that everything has gone very well this evening, or this morning, and everybody here was able to get some photos and keep the memories of this historic moment. Reporting live at UTEP, Genevieve Curtis, the KFOX 14 Morning News.
Genevieve, thank you. You heard Genevieve say that she could actually feel the boom. We got some calls into our newsroom that people who live along Mesa could actually feel the vibrations in their apartment.
Well, tons and tons of weight coming down, so that's certainly understandable. Moving on now, a community that once thrived under Asarco's smokestacks for nearly a century. Generation of Asarco workers and their families called Smeltertown their home. In our KFOX 14 special assignment, John Purvis has the story of a city that now only exists in the memories of those who once lived there.
Grandfather worked there maybe 40 years, and my father worked 41 years. And I worked 30 years. My brother, Robert, he worked maybe 32 years.
Longtime Asarco employee Pedro Flores was born in Smeltertown in 1937. It was a company town for the copper smelter that at its peak had as many as 5,000 residents.
We was raised here, born and raised here, and Rio Grande was our swimming pool. That's where we used to learn how to swim.
Mexican immigrants who came to work at Asarco first created Smeltertown in the 1880s, when the smelter site itself, which was out of town back then, could no longer provide enough room for all the workers to live.
And so a number of other workers and their families started to settle in the area down across what is now Paisano, in that little strip of land between the river and what was then the county road. Now we know it as Paisano Drive.
Historian Monica Perales has written a book about the rise and fall of Smeltertown. Like many other El Pasoans, she has roots here. Her grandfather worked at Asarco for many years, and her parents grew up in Smeltertown.
A lot of them had roots that stretched back into the late 19th and early 20th century.
Smeltertown had its own schools, a community church, and various businesses that thrived among the homes beneath Asarco's smokestacks.
Well, everybody knew everybody. There was no locks and doors. Everybody just walked up and, you know.
But the church, the schools, and homes are all gone now. A fence keeps trespassers out, and weeds grow out of brick planters where mulberry trees once towered.
I still think about Smeltertown. And I tell my wife, my kids, I used to live right there. B Street, 120 B Street.
And now what's there?
Nothing but it's empty. A lot of weeds.
The fall of Smeltertown began in 1970 when the city of El Paso and the state of Texas sued Asarco over air pollution. Then, during their investigation, health authorities discovered Smeltertown's children were contaminated with lead.
So what started out as an air pollution lawsuit quickly turned into one of lead contamination, and so that ultimately brought about Smeltertown's demise.
By 1973, everyone had moved out of Smeltertown. Many of them received no compensation because their homes were on Asarco property. Their city was simply torn down. Ironically, one of the places that's most alive with the history of Smeltertown is the Smelter Cemetery, where generations of Asarco employees and their family members are buried. There is no perpetual care at this cemetery, except for the families who still come to look after their loved ones' graves. Who's buried here?
This is my grandpa.
Grandpa.
Yeah.
And did he work at Asarco?
Yeah, he worked in Asarco. Well, he started working here in 1898. And he passed away in 1918.
One old Smeltertown neighborhood does remain intact, a place called La Calavera.
The fact that it's in this arroyo, the elements and the geography kind of protected it from some of the pollution that could be found in other parts of Smeltertown.
And there are some things about Smeltertown even the old-timers don't miss.
Sulfur. And when we used to live there too, man. Yeah, used to smell a lot. Like, I don't know if it was gas or something like that, but it was bad.
Luis Solis had hoped to see Asarco's smokestacks continue to tower over West El Paso's landscape.
To me, it's kind of sentimental. I wish they would leave it alone. I have a daughter living in Germany. She lives down there. She's been out there for 20 years. And when we go visit, out there they preserve, they're going to build something new, you know, they have a church or something, they build around it. But they conserve, they preserve what they have. And over here, what the first thing we do is just go out there and re-raise it, we tear it down.
It is so amazing to see those old photos, and we just got word that there are actually plans in the works to make that cemetery a state historic site. A lot of people, I think, would like to see that happen.
Certainly.
Smeltertown residents also played a crucial role in the creation of Mount Cristo Rey.
This is so interesting. They actually constructed an iron cross that first topped the mountain, and then their parish priest, Father Lourdes Costa, led an effort to place the 42-foot tall statue of Christ up on the peak, and that statue was actually constructed and dedicated on Mount Cristo Rey way back in 1939.
And while the historic Asarco smokestacks are now gone, there will be some pieces of history kept on that 600-acre site. The office is the most historic part of Asarco, and it is going to be preserved. It was the first building constructed on that site back in 1887. It remained the smelter's office until work ended in 1999. Roberto Puga, Asarco's trustee, is willing to donate that office building, but he wants the Historical Commission to demonstrate that they do indeed have the resources to maintain the 19th century structure.
All right, there's still more to come inside the blast zone.
Welcome back. We're going to check in one last time with KFOX 14 News anchor John Purvis live in West El Paso. John.
Well, Stephanie, right now, as you can see behind me, the cloud of dust that was so large not long ago has largely dissipated. It has cleared up tremendously, and there's not a lot of wind to speak of, but the cloud is largely gone, and that comes after a flawless demolition of both the Asarco smokestacks just over half an hour ago. It drew crowds from both sides of the border to check it out, and it was a thrilling experience.
Thank you so much. We can only hope that the same happens tomorrow. Our coverage in the blast zone coverage continues tomorrow morning at 8:30 with the demolition, the implosion of City Hall. You can watch it all live on air and online at KFOXTV.com, and of course follow us on Twitter and Facebook for the very latest updates.
And thank you for joining us on this historic morning. I'm Stephanie Guadiana.
And I'm Shelton Dotson. Our coverage of this morning's demolition doesn't end now. You can go to KFOXTV.com and check out video clips and galleries from our crews and our media partners, the El Paso Times. Be sure to join in tonight, coming up for extended coverage, a full hour on KFOX News at 9.
Bye-bye.